I talked briefly earlier about inner voice noise. I'd like to emphasize the word noise specifically, as it in effect creates a noise that makes it difficult for us to think clearly, logically, and communicate effectively. It usually takes the form of our own voice repeatedly talking back to us when we're in a state of rest or traveling, or generally not engaging our brain in any meaningful activity at that current time. A simple solution would be to find something to engage our brain all the time, or at least as soon as we notice this happening. But this is easier said than done, as we don't even usually realize that we are in fact talking to ourselves and usually making ourselves feel more depressed. In these situations, and we find ourselves in them multiple times throughout each and every day, we have in fact allowed what is known as an open loop of negative thinking to materialize and take over our rational thought processes. Now, we all know how powerful our brain is. It has the ability to find solutions to even the most complex of problems. When we can engage the neocortex, coupled with the subconscious positive thinking, we can achieve great things. Have you ever heard people say, "Oh, just sleep on it and the answer will come to you"? Perhaps you're trying to deal with a problem, you have a complicated issue, and often that old cliche comes up. Now, I know this to be true. I've actually experienced it myself when I was studying mathematics at university. I remember vividly a time that I was trying to solve a complicated problem that was completely baffling me. I worked on it, this one question, for the whole day, and eventually gave up and went to sleep. But when I woke up, I knew the answer. It was so glaringly obvious that I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it had taken me the whole of the previous day continually working on this, what seemed to be such a simple thing. The reason I was able to work out the answer was because my subconscious was still thinking about the problem whilst I was sleeping. Now, the difference here with this particular problem that I was trying to solve was because it was a mathematical one. Luckily, at that time, I was fairly confident at maths. I liked to challenge, and I knew in my own mind that I would eventually find the answer some way or somehow. The faith I had in my ability enabled me to focus on solving the problem rather than beating myself up for not being able to solve it. So I was lucky in that particular situation and saw the neocortex working in all of its glory. We'll be talking about the neocortex and how it kicks in a little bit later on in the course. But this situation is obviously not always the case. In many situations, we perhaps are not confident. In fact, we can feel very weak, unprepared, inadequate, or even hopeless. And this is when the real damage sets in and a negative thinking open loop is created. This damage can inhibit us and even make us become our own worst enemy. Let me give you an example. Imagine you call your girlfriend, but she doesn't answer the phone. Now, she usually answers the phone straight away. Anyway, so you decide to pop over to her house as she lives close to you. But as you knock on the door, you hear giggling coming from inside the house. You're ringing on the bell, but she takes a long time to answer. And when she eventually does answer and you go inside, you see one of her handsome work colleagues sitting on the sofa. The situation immediately becomes awkward. You feel challenged and begin asking questions such as, "So what are you guys doing?" The answers you receive don't completely satisfy your impending fear of potentially losing your girlfriend to this new handsome guy, and at this particular point, an open loop has been created. Now, what happens here can lead down a path of destruction, and often does, unless we find ways to challenge the thinking and the inner voice that's going on at this particular time. An open loop created as a result of a perceived threat can often lead to what is known as negative emotional reinforcement. So let me tell you a little bit more about what that is. What can often happen in a situation such as this is that the inner voice and negative emotion reinforcement work together in conjunction to cloud, in this situation, the disgruntled boyfriend's rational thinking, leading him down a winding path of perhaps making some silly decisions which create a negative situation that might not have even been there in the first place. As the boyfriend's inner voice begins explaining incorrectly the situation in a very direct manner, bombarding his brain with thoughts such as, they were hugging on the sofa, he was tickling her on the sofa, they were laughing at me, etc. The boyfriend will be feeling ever more anxious and fearful. His reactions may then lead him to questioning the two. Perhaps his body language, his tone, even his actions give away how he is feeling, and then the other two will pick up on the tension in the room, which may then subsequently rise. So what happens then? Well, typically the inner voices of the girlfriend and the handsome guy will be triggered in some way, and they may react to it by perhaps becoming defensive. In their minds, they will have their own inner voices that kick in and begin talking to them. The girlfriend's inner voice may be saying, why doesn't he trust me? Or why does he disrespect me by being so rude to my friend? She may then become defensive, distant, or even challenging. Now, the handsome guy's inner voice may be saying, have I done something wrong? What did I do? Why doesn't this guy like me? And therefore, he will react in a way that could come across as nervous, disingenuous, and even fearful to the boyfriend. The boyfriend will then pick up on this behavioral feedback from the other two, thereby reinforcing his illogical and incorrect fears, which then influence his negativity more, causing him to double down and make the completely innocent situation even worse, perhaps even confrontational. Now, this situation is just an example, but it is a common one. The feelings of jealousy and mistrust are some of the strongest. There are many more examples, many in the workplace, and they all stem from something in particular, which I'll be talking to you more about very soon. How do we challenge it? More importantly, how do we stop this negative cycle of destruction from happening? I'll be letting you know the reasons it happens and giving you the tools to prevent it very soon. See you in the next module.